Alright, so the Free People's player just mustered the elves down one more step on the political track. The elves are almost at war, but not quite. Alright, so the Shadow player has one more action to perform, alright? He has his little character action. Alright, what that allows him to do is it allows him to use some character cards, alright? Like right here, alright? If he wanted to, he could use this card, alright? But as you already know, this card is called Lure of the Ring. It's not applicable yet, mainly because the Fellowship is not revealed. But I will show you this, alright? Just for starters. If you look right here, in the top portion of the card, you're going to see a Palantir and a sword icon, alright? Now, if the card was playable, if it was, then because there is a sword icon in the top right hand corner of the card, and because I have a sword action dice, I could use the action die to play the card, alright? If it was a Palantir, then I could play the card. Palantirs let you play any card or draw any card. Just the way it works. But since it's not applicable, I'm going to move an army with it, alright? But there's special rules about these character action dice, alright? So with character action dice, that means I can move the characters or the minions, alright? So currently I only have Saruman in the game. But as you already know, Saruman's movement is 0, so he can never leave Orthanc, alright? He's like stuck there. Never can leave, alright? But I do have other leaders on the board, alright? I do have 3 Nazgul sitting pretty inside Mordor. And I also have over here in Dol Guldur, I also have another Nazgul. If I wanted to, I could start moving that army out, alright? Now, do take note, the Sauron nation is not yet at war, but I'm not breaking any rules by letting them leave the their national boundaries, alright? By the way, in case you haven't picked up on it, the blue line that outlines, you know, the whole Gondor region, that's the Gondor nation. The green line outlines the Rohan nation, the yellow line, the Isengard nation. The scattered red lines, top of the board, somewhat middle, and the Mordor area, that's the Sauron nation. The orangish line indicates the Southron and Easterling nation. The blue line, or the lighter blue line if you will, indicates the north. The brown line indicates the dwarf nation, and the green lines indicate the elf nations, alright? Those are the national borders. So when you see like national borders or boundaries or whatnot, that's what it's referring to. Alright, so I use my character die, the one with the sword on it, and I can move this arm, and I can move one army one space. I can't move 2 armies, I can only move 1 army. You can kind of think of it like this. I can move a leader, so I move a leader, alright? And I have the ability to let all this, to let the entire army follow this leader. I do empty out the stronghold, but that's not really important right now, because the only people that are a threat are the elves, but you know, work with what you got. Alternatively, I could have moved all the Nazgul around, alright? So we remember talking, this is just where it gets into personal bias or personal preference, but we remember where the Fellowship is. It starts out in Rivendell. Now I know that the Fellowship is either going to end up in Trollshaws or Fords of Bruinen at some point in the game. So I could use the character action dice, and I could move all the Nazgul, each and every one of them. And since they fly, they have infinite movement, alright? So if I wanted to, I could do something like this. Yeah? That would be just fine and legal. You know, 1 Nazgul in Trollshaws, 1 in Hollin, 1 in the Fords of Bruinen, and 1 in the High Pass. That would be just fine and legal, alright? But I don't want to do that just yet. I just want to move the army out of Dol Guldur, alright? So I do that. Put the Nazgul with them, put my other Nazgul back where they belong. And that's the end of that, alright? So the Shadow player just used up their last action dice. They put it to the side to indicate that it has been used, alright? Oh, and by the way, whenever I draw out these little hunt tokens, they stay drawn out. You know, they don't go back inside the little envelope. Not yet. If I run out of stuff in the envelope, then they can go back in. But they don't go back in for quite a while. Alright? So now that both players have used up all their action dice, now we would check for victory conditions. The first thing we check for is the Fellowship corrupted? Alright? No. They still have lots of points to go. The second thing is the ring destroyed? No, it is not. Alright, so we just checked for ring conditions for victory. Alright. Now we would check for military conditions on victory. Does the shadow player have 10 points of strongholds and or cities? No, he doesn't. Does the Free People's player have 4 points of strongholds and or cities? No, he doesn't. So then, the game continues back to the first round. Alright? So the first round is we draw our event cards. Alright? So as we remember, the Free People's player has 3 cards. He draws 1 of each. Every round it's the same. You always draw 1 card of each type. The Free People's player just drew Paths of the Woses and Mirror of Galadriel. Alright, you can read those cards at home if you want, but I'm not going to read them here. Don't want to. And the shadow player also draws 2 cards. Alright? And he draws the Breaking of the Fellowship and Rage of the Dunlendings. Alright? So those are his 2 cards that he just drew. Alright? So now it's Fellowship phase. The Free People's player could declare the position of the Fellowship, you know. He could say that he could declare their position. But it would be kind of silly or pointless. I don't know. He could do it. I don't really see a point in it. But he could declare them in Trollshaws or the Fords of Bruinen. But currently there's a slightly small advantage to staying in Rivendell because the Nazgul cannot enter a friendly stronghold of their own accord. The Free People's player could also change the Guide of the Fellowship, but he's not going to do that right now because there's no point. Alright? So now that both sides have drawn their cards and the Fellowship phase has happened, now the shadow player gets to determine how many hunt dice he's going to put in the hunt box. Alright, so now if you're playing by 2nd edition rules, then because the Free People's player moved at least once, the shadow player must leave at least 1 die in the box. Alright? If you were playing by 2nd edition rules, then if the Free People's player didn't put a dice in, then the shadow player wouldn't have to put any dice in. But that's 2nd edition rules. I'm not playing by those. That's what you would do if it did happen though. If the Free People's player moved last time, then the shadow player would have to put at least 1 die in there. If he didn't move, then the shadow player wouldn't have to put any dice in. But that doesn't matter. So both sides take their dice, alright, put them together. Now remember, the shadow player just got an extra die, alright? Now he has 8 dice, which helps him out quite a bit more. You'd be surprised how much 1 more action can make a difference, but it does. So now if the shadow player wants to, he puts dice in the hunt box, alright? So, I don't know, I could put however many dice I want to in there, but I'm just going to start out by putting, 3 in there, because I have a feeling that the Fellowship is going to start moving a little bit more, alright? So I put 3 dice in there, alright? And now both sides take the rest of their dice and they roll. Alright. Shaking all the dice. Alright, so same as before. We take all the dice that have an eyeball result and we put them in the hunt box. Alright? So now both players have an equal number of actions, but the shadow player has quite a bit stronger of a chance to find the Fellowship if they decide to move. And seeing as how the Fellowship now has 3 sword dice and 1 Will of the West, it could work out very, very well for the shadow player. Let's zoom in so you can see those. Alright. Alright, so before we continue, let's talk about a few things. You can see how I just went through one round, alright? The turn order, you know, it starts out with drawing event cards, one of each card. Both players draw one of each type. You have a hand limit of 6, but we haven't gotten into what to do when you go over that limit. But it's really, really easy. After the event step, then it's the fellowship phase. You know, the fellowship the Free People's player can declare where the fellowship is, alright? They could declare within one space of where they are, because that's where we are right now. Or they could change the leader. Since I didn't want to do either of those, I didn't, alright? Here's where the true nitty-gritty core of the game is, alright? It's in the action dice. It's in how well you use the resources that are allotted to you. This is... it becomes really hard to do a tutorial because I can't tell you how to do this. I mean, I guarantee you can see combinations like this, and you'll see a lot of, you know, musters and armies, and you'll see die rolls that are very often very similar to this, because, you know, the Free People's player is made up of character actions, and the Shadow player is made up of army actions and muster actions, alright? It's just how the game rolls, alright? But for this part, I'll just be playing through a walkthrough. I'm not going to really offer any strategy advice. This is where you just have to play a few games with your buddies or your friends and come up with your own strategy. I find one that works for me, and, you know, it works. I like it. It's a fun game. I enjoy it most of the time. Sometimes I get really frustrated, but the idea is that there's lots of paths to diverge on. There's not one set, you know, you do this first and then this and then this. It's more of, now what do you want to do? This is where you really have to think about how you want to do an end game result, or get to the end game. As before mentioned, the Free People's player main objective is to get his army, is to get the nations that he controls to be at war so he can muster and defend them while the Fellowship is moving to Mount Doom. That's the main objective, to destroy the ring. You never really want to go for the military victory, 4 points. It just doesn't really work. Shadow player, he wants to focus generally on both halves. He wants to get the ring bearer corrupted as much as possible and take down as many civilizations as possible, or as many nations as he can. It's really hard to say, but we'll just start with this. Don't view this as what you should do, just view it as an explanation of what to do or how to do things. It's not a strategy, it's more of a walkthrough. So keeping that in mind, it's the Free People's player's turn. Look through my cards to see what I have. Alright. Can't use most of these. I could use Mirror of Galadriel. I won't go over it, but if you're following along at home, the cost for the card is either a Palantir or a character sword action die. I have both. You know, I have a Will of the West that could be that. I have a character die. I could use it right now, but I don't feel I need to, because I just don't, alright? There's also a little clause on that, but, you know, the Fellowship is in Rivendell, so we're not even going to use that right now. It wouldn't be very advantageous. So all the Free People's player is going to do is move the Fellowship. Alright? So he takes one dice from here, and he puts it over in the shadow box, like so. Alright? Now the Shadow player gets to roll 4 dice, because he has 4 eyeball dice in the hunt box. So the Shadow player takes his 4 dice and rolls them. Oh look, I got a 4, a 2, a 3, and a 6. So I got 1 successful hunt die. So that means I open up the hunt pouch and pull out the next hunt token. Alright? And it's a 3. Alright? So it helps if you know a little bit what numbers are inside the hunt pouch. But as for the time being, I am going to take all that damage as the Free People's player, as I'm going to kill off my leader for that, if that makes any sense. Alright? So that means I'm going to remove Gandalf from the Fellowship of the Ring. Alright? So that means that because Gandalf is a level 3, he absorbs all that corruption and he dies. So his card is removed and his figure is removed, and they go off of the game board, alright? Off to the side somewhere. Alright? This plays to my advantage. It's very helpful. Alright? So now that the leader is gone, the next companion inside the fellowship with the highest level then becomes the leader. Alright? Currently that is Strider. He's the only other level 3 companion in the fellowship. If Strider was gone, and since there are like 3 or 4 level 2 characters, there's 3 level 2 characters in there, then I could pick between any one of them. But since Strider has the most leadership points, being 3, then he becomes the automatic leader of the fellowship. I take his card, move it to the top of the deck. If you're following along at home, you're going to want to flip over his card and read what his card can do. Just basically point blank, just to give you some vocabulary. If you've read his card, these are action dice, alright? You know, these are all action dice, but more specifically for the Free People's player, these are action dice. Alright? So that card's very self-explanatory. You can't use his other ability until he's out of the fellowship, but we'll get to that soon enough, alright? So the fellowship just moved. The fellowship did not have to take those 3 points of corruption because Gandalf is a level 3. He absorbed all 3 points of corruption. So the fellowship moves 1 on the fellowship track. Not the corruption counter, just the fellowship track counter. Alright? If it was 2, I might have still done it, you know, because I want to get Gandalf dead. Alright? It's helpful if he's dead, alright? So if it was 2, then I would not, you know, lose a point of corruption on the corruption track. That would stay right where it is. If I drew a 2, then Gandalf would still die. It would be the same as if I drew a 3, same as if I drew a 1. And if it had a reveal icon on it, I would reveal the fellowship. Alright? But now the fellowship is 2 spaces away. Alright? So now it's the shadow player's turn. Alright, so it's the shadow player's turn. So the shadow player, as a shadow player, I look through my cards and I pick a card that I would like to use. The card that I'm going to use is Rage of the Dunlendings. Now if you're following along at home, you can look in the top left hand corner and the top right hand corner and look at the cost of this card. It's no real secret, but the cost is either a Palantir or a muster action die. So if I use a Palantir die, I can play the card. If I use a muster action die, I can play the card. Alright? I could use either or. It doesn't make a difference which one I use. So just for kicks and giggles, I'm going to use the Palantir die. So, you know, I indicate it, put the Palantir die off to the side, and I execute the effects of the card. I look at the card. The bold-faced text is, I can check that off the list. That is satisfied. I then do what it says on the card. If you're following along at home, you'll be able to see this really easily, but I just do it anyway. Alright? Alright, so when I use cards to recruit, most of the time cards let you break rules that you're not normally able to break. For example, with this card I can place 2 units somewhere, just basic. And for example, on the game board we have these regions. So these are called regions. I'm pretty sure I've covered this before, but you know, this region is adjacent to this region is adjacent to this region. If a region is touching another region, they're adjacent. This black line that you see every now and again inside the game, that means that, for example, South Dunland and Fangorn are not adjacent, alright? Even though it looks like they are, the black line indicates that they're not, alright? If there's a white line in between the 2 regions, then that means they're adjacent. So when card text says adjacent regions or whatnot, then, you know, you can treat those as adjacent. But for example, South Dunland and Orthanc, those are not adjacent regions, alright? There's a mountain coming down in between them. That's how you need to think about that black line. Alright, so I follow the text on the card. The text on the card also has, you know, another effect that I could use, but I'm not going to. I just don't want to right now. Not yet. Alright, so I just used the card, this one, Rage of the Dunlendings, right? I indicate that it's been used by putting it in a discard pile. It doesn't really matter where you put this card. I'm just going to put it off to the side on this little box. I don't know if you need to leave the card up or face down. I don't think it matters. The shadow player plays the card. The shadow player names the card, says what he's going to do with it, and then plays it off to the side. That's basically how it works. So the shadow player just used his turn to do that. Alright, now it's the Free People's player's turn. Alright, just for kicks and giggles, because I can, or I don't have to, but I'm going to move the Fellowship again so we can see how that works, alright? So remember from last time, the Fellowship has already been moved, alright? Indicated by their single dice in the hunt box, alright? So the Fellowship player uses another one of their dice. Alright, so you know, same as before, the Fellowship takes one of their dice, moves it off to the side to show that it's been used. Gonna move these dice out of the way. Shadow player looks inside the shadow box to see how many dice he can roll. Alright, 4. Now here's the cool thing. He can roll 4 dice, but he looks here to see how many advantages he has. So for example, there's 1 dice in this side of the box, 1 blue die, because the Fellowship has already moved once. Now all his dice get a +1 bonus. Alright? So now he can roll 4 dice, and on 5s and 6s he can move, it's a successful hunt. Alright? So let's do that. It's a 5 and 6 because the Fellowship has already moved, and the game wants to make it a little bit more dangerous to move the Fellowship if it's already moved once in the game. Alright, so we roll the dice. And we have 2 hits. Alright, so we go to the hunt tile bag or container, whatever, and grab only 1 tile, not 2. And we grab this tile. Alright, so the Fellowship player has to take 0 damage, but the Fellowship is now revealed. Alright, so that goes off to the side to show that it's been used. Alright, you could also check at this moment to, you know, if the Fellowship is satisfying any of the re-roll conditions. So currently the Fellowship is not satisfying any of the reroll conditions. There's not a Nazgul in there, it's not a shadow controlled stronghold, and there's no enemy units inside the same region as the Fellowship's last known position, which is what that marker truly is. It's the Fellowship's last known position. Alright, so the Fellowship moves. They move twice, but they are revealed, so now the Fellowship has to reveal where they are. This is indicated by flipping over this token right here to the revealed side. Alright. Oh, you can't see that. Alright. So I just flip this token over to the revealed side. Used to be here, but I flip it to here and I move it to 0. Alright, very important. So I moved it to 0, and now I have to move the Fellowship figure 2 spaces from Rivendell. It can be anywhere within 2 spaces of Rivendell. Alright? It could stay in Rivendell, but I don't want it to. It could go to the Fords of Bruinen, but I don't want it to. I want it to go through Hollin. I want it to go to Hollin. Alright? And that's it. So the Fellowship player took a chance, alright, that, you know, the Shadow player maybe wouldn't have any if the Fellowship is revealed cards, alright? But the Shadow player does, because if you're following along at home, you're going to go, oh boy, I can use these cool cards now. Alright? So that's how that would work, alright? No corruption points were noted on the little token, so the Fellowship player doesn't have to take any corruption for that movement. It was a 0, remember? A 0 and a revealed. Alright? So now it's the Shadow player's turn. Alright? So the Shadow player, if you're remembering from last time, he has a few cards, alright? The Lure of the Ring and the Breaking of the Fellowship. Alright, so we know what the Shadow player's cards are. Now we have to decide which one we want to use. Because the Fellowship is revealed, it's an opportune time to use the cards for, you know, that say if the Fellowship is revealed. Alright? Here's where a little bit of strategy has to come into play. The Shadow player knows that the Fellowship player is going to be moving sometime eventually. Alright? So the shadow player needs to keep in reserve some dice with some character actions and maybe some Palantir actions so that he can use the nasty cards he has available. Alright? Lucky for me, I had this dice here. If I didn't have this dice, say it was, you know, army action die, then I wouldn't be able to play any of my cards. Because if you look in the top corners of the cards for those for the two cards that hurt the Fellowship when they're revealed, right? Then you note that it's either a Palantir or a sword. I would either need a Palantir action or a sword action. Good thing I have a sword, right? I can use one of them. Can't use both. Regrettable, but whatever. Alright, so I'm going to use the sword action die. I'm going to move this off to the side, and I'm going to play what am I going to play? Oh, that's a good one. I'm going to play the Breaking of the Fellowship. Alright? So, I play it. So I do the first thing it says. This is a hunt tile that was drawn. Alright, so because it's a 0, then I can't do anything on the card. Alright, you can see that, I can see that. It doesn't do anything. Alright, so that was a good shot, but it just didn't work. Now, you might say that it's a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing, because I'm getting rid of a stupid 0 reveal token. Those things help the Fellowship more than getting a 3 does, alright? So knowing what's inside the bag is also helpful, alright? So I just used the card, but it didn't take effect because nothing happened because of the 0 that I drew, alright? Basically how it works. You can follow along at home if you have any other questions on what I just did, you know. Post your questions to Board Game Geek. I'm sure millions of satisfied viewers will answer your questions with gusto. Alright, so I discard my card with my other card. You can make 2 separate discard piles. It doesn't matter. Let's just keep playing. Alright, so we're back to here now. Oh, and it's the end of that little action, so you know the Fellowship player moved. The shadow player rolled his dice, got a +1 bonus on all of his dice, right? But now that the turn is over, so it's now the shadow player's turn, at the end of the round of that happening, the Free People's player is going to take the dice that they just used to do that action, and they're going to place it in the hunt box. So now you can probably tell that if the Fellowship player moves the Fellowship again, the shadow player will still get 4 dice, right? He'll get 4 dice to roll, but this time he'll have a +2 advantage on all of his die rolls. So then 4, 5s, and 6s will then be able to be counted as successful hunts. That's how it gets more dangerous the more the Fellowship moves during the game. Alright? So far, to be able to move that far with the Fellowship is really good luck. You know? Nothing major has happened. Alright? So we look at the dice. Alright? We look at the available actions. Right? Currently, the Fellowship is revealed. I want to hide them. Alright? Very important that they're hidden. I do not want to give the shadow player another chance to play one of his nasty cards. Alright? So I'm going to use this dice right here. I don't have to. I could, you know, do other army stuff, but I don't want to. I'm going to use this dice right here, character sword icon. Alright? And I'm just going to hide the Fellowship. That is indicated simply by me flipping over the token from revealed to hidden. That's it. That's my turn. Alright? Hiding the Fellowship does not add another dice to the hunt box. It just goes off to the side. Alright, so now it's the shadow player's turn. He has these 2 dice left, these 2 actions. Alright, so he uses them. And because I know what I'm doing, and because I really want to use Saruman's ability as much as I possibly can, alright, I'm going to use his ability. And if you're reading along at home, you can look at this in the rule book, It's also online anywhere. I can use a muster action die to recruit one regular Isengard unit in every Isengard settlement. That's really, really, really good. Or I can replace 2 regulars in Orthanc with elites. Alright? Also note that while Saruman is in play, all my Isengard elite units count as leaders as well. Alright? So that's really, really good. Alright? But first things first, I'm gonna recruit 1 regular Isengard unit in every Isengard settlement, which is North Dunland, South Dunland, and Orthanc. Alright? Special advantage for being Saruman. Really cool, but it works. Alright? Alright, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but before the game starts, you want to have every nation's army pieces and units outside the board area. Alright, I'm playing in a not very convenient area, but it works. So I just noticed that I do not have enough Isengard regulars to do that action. I still could do it. I have 1 Isengard regular available to me currently. Alright? And I still could do the action, you know. I could put 1 guy here and that would count, and I could use Saruman's ability that way. But I don't want to. That would be a waste. Alright? So I'm going to replace 2 Isengard regulars in Orthanc. Take those out and put 2 Isengard elites in. Alright, we've already talked about the differences between regulars and elites. That's a really good move. Saruman is really cool at making monsters. Alright, so that's his action. Alright, so back to now it's this Free People's player's turn, and he has a Will of the West die left. So